Even if you fast 12 hours and eat for 12 hours, which is a much more reasonable pattern for intermittent fasting, you still get the benefit. You still activate your metabolism. You still burn down harmful body fat, and you still lose weight. Intermittent fasting helps your metabolism get stronger. And the reason is this: we are intermittently fasting every single day. It's the most natural thing to our body. And the reason is that fasting means not eating, and when we're sleeping, we're not eating. And so every single day when we're sleeping, we are actually doing fasting. We intermittently sleep every 24 hours, every day, means that we're intermittently fasting. Intermittent fasting is not actually something that was invented as a health trend. It is something that is very natural. When you're actually fasting, you're actually turning on your metabolism. That's right. Intermittent fasting helps your metabolism get stronger. And the reason is this: when you're actually eating, you're putting calories in your body. Your body's metabolism is ready to actually receive those nutrients and begin storing the energy into your body, right? But when you're fasting, not eating, your body's like a race car. It shifts gears in order to go from food storing, energy storing mode to energy burning mode. So when you're sleeping and you're fasting and you're not eating, your metabolism shifts into fuel burning mode. That's right. When you're sleeping, you're burning fuel. And one of the things it does is it burns off those extra calories you might have eaten during the day, and actually can burn down harmful body fat. And that's another benefit of intermittent fasting. Even though intermittent fasting is often described as 16 hours of not eating fasting and 8 hours of eating, in fact, it's pretty hard to squeeze all your eating in 8 hours for most people. If you got a family, if you got a job, if you're actually out and about traveling, not that easy to squeeze all your eating into 8 hours. However, studies have shown that even if you fast 12 hours and eat for 12 hours, which is a much more reasonable pattern for intermittent fasting, you still get the benefit. You still activate your metabolism. You still burn down harmful body fat, and you still lose weight. Now, you do lose more weight when you actually can fast for 16 hours, but 12 hours is enough to actually give you a boost. And so here's how I think about 12 hours of fasting. So think about it. If you eat dinner at, let's say, 7 o'clock in the evening, and most people eat dinner for about an hour, so at 8 o'clock, you put your dishes away. Now, don't eat after you put your dishes away, all right? When your dishes go into the sink, that's it, no more food. And now, let's say you go to bed at 11 o'clock. You've had 3 hours of not eating. Now, 11 o'clock, let's say you go to bed. We all know that you should be sleeping about 8 hours a day. Good for your immune system, good for overall health, all right? Brain, heart health, all 8 hours is good for, is a really, really good period of rest. Well, 8 hours from 11 o'clock means you're getting up at, let's say, 7 o'clock in the morning, all right? So it's 3 hours after the dishes go in the sink, plus 8 hours, that's 11 hours. Now let's say you get up at 7, all right? Now, rather than do what your mother told you to do, which is to roll out of bed and eat breakfast right away so you could catch the school bus to go to school with some nutrition in your system so your brain will function and you can learn. In fact, as adults, we don't need to do that. So when you get up, let's say it's 7 in the morning, here's what I do. I don't eat breakfast right away. In fact, I will wait about an hour before I eat anything, all right? And how do I do that? Well, I take my time getting ready. Take a shower, get dressed. I might check my emails. I might read a book. I might go out for a walk. It's just an hour, all right? And then I might sit down to eat something. And now let's do the math. From 8 o'clock the evening before to 11 o'clock, that's 3 hours. No, don't eat. No midnight snack. Don't be sitting in front of the television eating snacks along the way in the evening. Okay, now 11 o'clock to 7 o'clock in the morning, that is 8 hours. Now you're talking about 3 plus 8 is 11 hours. I told you get up and take your time. Don't eat anything right away. And now you're adding an extra hour, 3 plus 8, 11 plus 1. Bingo, you got your 12 hours of fasting. Now during that time, remember what I told you, when you're fasting, your body shifts into metabolism gear to burn down extra calories and burn down harmful body fat. And during that period, also reset your gut microbiome. Now you've got healthier gut, healthy gut, healthy body, healthy brain, better mood. All right, so intermittent fasting, 12 and 12, actually gives you lots of benefits. And although you get more benefits if you fast for 16 hours, 12 hours fasting is perfectly reasonable in order to be able to do. I'm going to give you some bonus tips on intermittent fasting when you're going to do it, no matter how often and how long you actually do it. One thing is that when you're fasting, intermittent fasting, when you do eat, one of the things that you want to make sure you do is you don't overeat. Sometimes when you do intermittent fasting, when you fast for a longer period of time, you might be more hungry. Like if I skip breakfast, who knows? For lunch, I might be hungrier. Be very careful not to overeat when you actually sit down to eat. That's a very important tip. Second tip is that when you're going to eat healthy food. Don't fast and do all this good stuff for your metabolism and then make a poor choice by eating ultra-processed foods and processed sugars and just kind of like undo all the healthy things that you just did for yourself. There are ways of actually extending fasting and practicing fasting to be able to make your body do more during this fasting time. And I'm going to explain all that. But I want to take you back into history a little bit. There are many cultures and religions that actually routinely practice fasting. For example, when I was on a gap year, before I went to medical school, I traveled to the Mediterranean. And one of the interesting experiences I had was to go to Mount Athos, which is this holy mountain in northeast Greece. It is a series of 20 monasteries built into the rock of this mountain. And I was doing some mountain climbing and hiking and doing research on the livelihood and the health of the people that lived in this monastic community. Now, they actually live a 16th century lifestyle, and that's what made me fascinated to actually take a look at what it would be like to actually live during medieval times. So that was a kind of like going to the time machine and coming out in the 16th century, for example. But the monks actually, in Eastern Orthodox religion, actually practice routine fasting. So this is fasting isn't just a modern trend. It's something that's been around for a long time. So fasting is also very natural. We do it every single day when we're not eating.
Hey there. Have you heard of intermittent fasting? I'm sure you have. It's not what you eat, but it's about when you eat. And I've got a simple guide to help you get started with intermittent fasting. If you're looking for an easy way to boost your energy and improve your health, and maybe shed a few pounds along the way, this could be the perfect solution for you. In my guide, I'm going to show you how fasting helps your body burn fat and also repair itself. It's an easy thing that you can do effortlessly every single day. Plus, I'll give you tips on how to succeed with intermittent fasting. And I'll tell you the science behind why this works. Just click the link below to grab your free copy, or scan the QR code on the screen right now. Now, let's get back to the video.
Let me extend this idea of fasting, not eating, to an extreme. So if you were shipwrecked on a desert island and you didn't have food, or if your car broke down in the desert and you had to walk through, just parched desert environment for miles and miles and miles, and there was no food, eventually you would be not eating for not just hours, but for days. Okay, and that's also a kind of fasting. And eventually you'll actually start to consume your own body because your body is looking for energy, and that fasting becomes starvation. And obviously you've seen pictures of people in concentration camps and in other extreme circumstances where they become skeletal. They have almost no muscle, no fat left in their body because they've been starving, and that's an extreme of fasting. And so that's important to understand as well. If you're in a desert and you don't eat for days and days and days, your body will consume itself, and that's an extreme of fasting, all right? Now, to understand the opposite end of fasting, let's talk about not fasting. So you're eating all the time. In fact, you're overeating, all right? And this is actually one of the big problems in many modern societies because we are surrounded by an abundance of food, and we are marketed food all the time, and we have it always just in front of us. So it's easy to snack on things. And then when we're eating, we're not eating mindfully, we're busy. And when we're overeating, we actually overload our metabolism. Okay. And that's the opposite of fasting. And when we're eating, what happens is that our body, our pancreas produces insulin, and insulin comes out whenever we are eating to be able to draw the fuel from the food that we just ate and put it into our muscles and put it into our storage systems, our fuel tanks in our body. That's our body fat, so that we have enough energy. Okay, it's very, very simple. And if you eat regularly, your insulin will go up and it'll actually take your blood glucose down to normal levels. And then you wait for your next meal, and then your glucose goes up, the fuel goes up, the insulin comes out, draws it back, and your insulin and your glucose levels go back down. That's basically how our body and our metabolism, the main part of our metabolism, works when it comes to eating and hormones like insulin. So I'm not going to go any much deeper than that for the moment. But what happens if you overeat and you're continuously putting fuel in your body, it's kind of like taking your car to a gas station and filling up the tank, and rather than stopping and pulling the nozzle out when the clicker goes on, your tank is full, you just keep forcing more fuel into your tank. Now in your car, the gas tank, the fuel tank, is actually made out of metal, so it'll just overflow. But in our body, when we actually overflow our fuel tank by adding too much fuel, meaning overeating, what we're doing is we're able to stretch our fuel tanks, and that's our fat cells. And you keep on stretching the next one and the next one, and you can actually make a single fat cell expand 3 times its size. That's 300%. And then you can actually make more fat cells when you need more fuel because you're actually eating more, overfilling our tank, so to speak. So fat fuel tank goes up, gets bigger, bigger, and you make some more, bigger, bigger. And this is exactly what we're actually seeing, this obesity epidemic. And between fasting normally and overeating, and then becoming and putting our metabolism through a lot of stress because we've got too much fuel in our body. And then you're actually stretching out your fat cells. That becomes obesity. And all the bad things you can imagine that happen in your body when you've got too much fat, too much fuel, becomes inflammatory and actually takes down your health. Your whole health systems actually get derailed. I read about your health systems in my book, Eat to Beat Disease, and I talk about metabolism and body fat in Eat to Beat Your Diet, my second book. And so if you want to actually get much more detail, I'd recommend you just read those books because I explain that in great detail. But for today, what I wanted to actually do is say overeating overwhelms your metabolism. When you've got too much fuel, you'll actually cause a lot of insulin to come out as well. And insulin, as I told you, is actually trying to draw that fuel into your muscles and into your fat stores. When you have too much insulin, one of the things that happens is that your body needs to make more insulin, keep on making more insulin because it needs more and more insulin. Then you actually have a lot of something called insulin-like growth factor that's produced in your body, IGF-1. And this insulin-like growth factor in normal amounts is perfectly healthy. But when there's too much insulin-like growth factor, IGF-1, that's a setup for a lot of dangerous situations, including metabolic problems, but also even cancer. Cancer is stimulated by an excess of IGF-1. This has been shown in the laboratory. It's been correlated in the clinic. And this is one of the reasons we think that overeating, metabolic syndrome, overweight, and obesity actually is tagged in part to the whole idea of cancer. Okay, now, the other thing when you grow a lot of fat is that as fat expands, it's outstripping its blood supply. And when that actually happens, inflammation sets in. And now you've got inflammatory fat, and your body actually suffers from the consequences of inflammation as well. So all this overeating and obesity to starvation, these are the two bookends. These are two extremes. And somewhere in the middle is exactly where we want to be. All right. So fasting is natural. Fasting is also beneficial. And let me kind of talk about the benefits of fasting as well. What's happening when we're not eating? Well, the great way to ask this is what happens when we're sleeping? Well, number one is that when we're not eating for a prolonged period of time, our insulin levels go down because there's no more fuel in the body to actually bring to your muscles and our fat stores. When our insulin goes down, our metabolism shifts gears. I call this like shifting gears in a race car, and it goes from fat storing mode to fat burning mode. All right, and when you're burning fat, that's actually when you're fasting. That's when you're sleeping. So a lot of people don't realize this, but we're actually burning fat when we're sleeping. You don't even need to exercise in order to burn fat. That's actually part of our body's natural metabolism. And that's also the reason why you want to actually fast for a good amount of time every night. So what's a good amount of time? Well, we know that on average, sleeping 7 to 9 hours an evening, so let's round that out and calling it 8 hours, is actually a good amount of time to sleep. Sleeping is restorative to your brain, to our metabolism, to our gut microbiome, to our immune system. Sleeping is so important for us. And one of the reasons it's important is that it gives us this window of fasting. So let's call it 8 hours of fasting, 8 hours of sleeping, where our body's shifted into mode to actually burn down extra fat stores. That's actually really beneficial because whatever calories you've loaded into your body during the day, you get to burn some of them off in the evening. Okay, so again, this occurs, you shift into this state because your insulin levels are low, because you're not putting fuel into your body, and your body shifts into gear. Now, the other thing that can actually happen, one of the things that we say is that when you're sleeping at night, you should sleep in a cool room, like 67, 68 degrees Fahrenheit. That's pretty cool, all right? And the reason that is because at cooler temperatures, we get more benefit out of this. One of the things that can happen is that at cooler temperatures, our brown fat, which is a healthy fat in our body, it's not wiggly jiggly like the muffin top or the fat in your thighs. It's actually wafer thin fat around the side of your neck, behind your breastbone, a little bit between your shoulder blades. And brown fat at cool temperatures switches on. It's like turning on the gas jets on your stovetop, click, 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 whoosh. And on your stovetop, to turn on the gas, you need the flame is drawing gas, fuel from someplace. It could be a gas propane tank in the side of your house. It could be from the town's gas lines. But in your body, when your brown fat turns on, it's a process called thermogenesis. It triggers on the generation of heat. Click, 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 whoosh. It has to draw that fuel from your white fat. Brown fat, good fat draws extra fuel from your white fat, which can be bad fat if you have too much of it, particularly in the tube of your body called the visceral fat. And this actually happens at cooler temperatures. So when you're sleeping and fasting, if you turn down the temperature, that's as a little practical tip, you're actually you're improving your metabolism because you're actually turning on thermogenesis as well. All right. Now, white fat is that inflammatory fat that builds up, can expand and become inflammatory and cause all these problems. So brown fat is good fat, and it actually is turned on, activated when you actually have a cool temperature. Now, when you are actually burning down that extra body fat that you don't need, one of the benefits is that your inflammation actually starts to taper off. Now, this isn't just on an hour-to-hour basis or even a one-evening basis. This actually happens over time. And so this is why you want to practice regular fasting, which all of us do anyway when we're sleeping. But you should be conscious about it and mindful of the fact that when you get a good night's sleep, you're actually doing something good for your metabolism by burning off extra body fat. All right. Now, so where does all this, the new trend of intermittent fasting come from? It sounds like it's a brand new diet trend and everybody's getting into it, and you have to fast for 16 hours and eat only 8 hours. Now think about it. Eating only 8 hours a day would be like getting up in the morning at 8 o'clock and eating breakfast, okay? And then if you wanted to have everything squeezed in 8 hours, you got to eat dinner before 4 o'clock. And that's your 8 hour window. And then the rest of it is fasting. Look, a lot of people do that. It's a practice, and it works because if you're actually not eating for 16 hours, your body's shifted into that fat burning mode. You're actually going to lose weight because you're going to burn down extra fuel, burn down a lot of extra calories, and that can be beneficial for your body. But to me, and I think for most people that I know, probably you as well, practicing eating within an 8 hour window. So that's a tall order because it doesn't fit into most people's schedules. If you have a family, if you're cooking for a family, if you've got kids, if you've got a regular day job where you need to dine out, it's very, very difficult to actually squeeze everything into an 8 hour window. If you can do it, more power to you. But really, the whole point of healthy fasting and basically overall lifestyle and diet and lifestyle health is really to do something you can sustain regularly over the course of your lifetime, right? So it's very hard for most people to do 16-8 over the course of their lives. So I want to actually explain how to actually do fasting in a more common sense sort of way. So first of all, I want to just recap a little bit the 16-8, which does work. And by the way, 16 and 8, 16 hours of fasting and 8 hours of eating isn't some magic number. I mean, it works clinically, it works in people, but isn't a magic number that was studied in huge clinical trials and then medical scientists pulled out, you have to fast for 16 hours. It's not a hard fast rule. Any fasting actually works. And in fact, the 16-8 idea came from a publication that was from lab animals, all right? So that 16-8 was kind of arbitrary from a researcher, and it does work in people, but again, it's not that practical. So, and then during that 16 hours of fasting, again, your metabolism is shifting into fat burning mode, you're burning down extra calories, you're lowering inflammation, you're losing visceral fat, and you're losing body weight, all right? So it's actually good for you in a lot of different ways. However, it's not practical. So what I actually think that you should know is that research has been done showing not only 16 hours of fasting and 8 hours of eating works, but even 12 hours of fasting and 12 hours of eating, which is a much more reasonable time frame, also is a decent way of actually doing fasting. Okay, you can also have weight loss, you can also lose body fat, you can also improve your metabolism. All right, and that's actually quite a reasonable way to actually operate.
Hey there, are you ready to use food to improve your health? I do cover a lot in my YouTube videos, but there's only so much time to dive deep into how to use food as medicine. That's why I created my Eat to Beat Disease course. In my course, I walk you through how to use everyday foods that you can find in your grocery store to boost your body's health defenses. This is all based on my research, and everything is rooted in science. And I've made it super easy to follow with practical everyday tips. Whether you're trying to prevent disease or just want to optimize your health for longevity, my Eat to Beat Disease course gives you all the tools to make it real and to help you get lasting changes that will help you live longer and live better. To learn more, click the link below or scan the QR code on the screen. I can't wait to get started together in my course. Now, back to the video.
Now, before we talk about 12 hours of fasting and 12 hours of eating, which is the more reasonable way of doing it, I want to actually talk about there's some situations where people do fast from a medical perspective for long periods of time, 16 hours and even more, maybe even fasting for a day or two. And what happens is that when you fast for a long time, before you go into starvation, your body actually starts to generate its own energy, right? So you're not putting fuel into your body, and your body eventually senses this and it goes into panic mode. It goes, okay, now we need a new plan A to get some energy. So what it does is that your body will actually produce ketones. Ketones are an alternative energy source in your body. You can't produce them forever, all right? This is when you start digesting your own body. But during the period of time you're producing ketones as a fuel source, and your brain uses ketones, for example, it's been found by medical researchers that it can be useful for treating seizure disorders and epilepsy, okay? It's also been studied in, because it affects the brain, it's also been used as a metabolic intervention to treat brain cancers like glioblastoma. And there's some evidence showing that fasting and ketogenesis, the generation of ketones, can be helpful and useful, and there's an active area of research. Okay, so what I want to actually say now is let's talk about how to actually do it in a window that's actually quite reasonable to do. So 12 hours of fasting and 12 hours of eating, you can actually do that very easily. And the key thing I want to tell you is that no matter how many hours you're fasting, the one thing is when you finally do eat, let's say you eat breakfast after, at 8 o'clock, or let's say that you skip breakfast, you're eating lunch, whatever you do, you don't want to overeat. Remember we talked about overeating. What overeating does is actually overloads fuel, puts too much fuel in your fuel tank, and you're going to start building up those fat stores again. And so when you fast too long, you tend to get really, really hungry, and that actually sets you up to actually overeat. I like to remind people this idea of not overeating. There's a Japanese saying from a Confucian concept called hara hachibanmi. Hara hachibanmi basically means stop eating when you're 80% full, meaning when you're satisfied with your meal, you got to have interoception. That means that you're paying attention to how your body feels. When you feel satisfied that you've had your food, but not full, so you're 80% full, on your way there, but you're not full, stop. Leave the party before it's over. Don't clean your plate. Stop when you're 80% full and leave the table, all right? Or stop eating. That's actually a good rule of thumb, so you're not overeating after you're actually fasting. Now, there's a couple of things that you want to look at when you're looking at time windows, because I just gave you a time window during the day that I think works for most people, certainly works for me. But there are some situations that require you to be a little bit more creative. For example, if you work a night shift, so whether you're a security guard, you're a nurse, you're a doctor, you're a fireman, on overnight shift, graveyard shift, or you're a policeman, look, you're actually going to be dealing with a completely different mindset, but you can actually work it out in your head where when you are awake and at work, you're actually eating. And then when you come home post shift, you use those, you use that 8 hours and then extension on both sides in order to be able to still give you the 12 hours. The key is that when if you're going to eat at work, when you come home, don't eat a ton of food and keep on eating a ton of food when you're home, like as if you were having a day shift job. That way, you're not disturbing your sleep cycle, your metabolic cycle, your fasting cycle while you're at home during the day. All right, so you just got to be able to invert, turn the schedule upside down. If you're doing a night shift, treat the night shift as the time you're going to be eating. And then when you're at home, don't start picking at the food during breakfast, lunch, and dinner hours. Nope, just flip it around, and home time becomes fasting time. All right, now the one thing that's difficult about night shift is that during the daytime, sometimes it's hard to sleep quite as well. So you're not actually getting good deep sleep. We call it REM sleep. That just refers to the brain waves, the type of brain waves. We're having a really good sleep. So you're may not be shifting fully into metabolic burning mode. All right. And so night shift isn't the best for metabolic health. And that's why actually clinical studies have shown that people who work night shifts are more vulnerable to chronic diseases, more vulnerable to diabetes, more vulnerable to cardiovascular disease, and even more vulnerable to cancer. So my advice, if you work the night shift, and I've worked plenty of night shifts as a doctor, all right, is that when you get a chance, ask for the day shift, all right? Now, another couple of things that are to keep in mind is that, how do you manage fasting when you're traveling? You're on vacation or you're on business travel. And this is the tough one because you might be crossing time zones, right? It's evening when you leave. It's a bright day when you wake up, and you might not have slept well on the plane, and you might have been fed all the time on the plane, or you might be in a hotel and now you don't have ready access to food. You don't have much control over the food. Vacation is really, really tough. So what I actually want to share with you is a rule of thumb about fasting that I learned from when I was on Mount Athos. I told you during my gap year, I spent time in Greece in a northeast section called Mount Athos. I visited to do some research and some rock climbing, mountain climbing. It was an amazing experience. Anybody who doesn't know what Mount Athos is, you should check it out. It's a fascinating place, like living a 16th century lifestyle. But I remember talking to the monks there who are pretty hardcore about their fasting regimen when they're in the monasteries. They basically say when they're traveling, because I asked them this very question, what do you do when you're traveling? How do you actually handle the fast? And they basically said, look, they cut themselves a break when they're traveling or when they're sick, and they don't actually have to stick to those hard and fast rules for when they're eating and not eating. So that's actually what I would actually tell you, is that when you're traveling, during that period, you're going from point A to point B. Take it easy on yourself. You can step back from the travel thing, let whatever's going to happen. you know what you know what your body does when you're actually sleeping and not eating is that you're actually switching into a fat burning mode, which is good. But don't get too stressed out, all right, about it, and try to get back into the program when you get to where you are, or when you can get back home to have a more regular program. That's actually a great way, sort of like to be able to handle traveling. I think that, part of the joy of traveling is the food. Part of the joy of traveling is to be able to immerse yourself in the environment. So you want to actually try to adjust yourself into your new environment as quickly as possible if this is a vacation. And once you're adjusted, okay, keep in mind, when you're sleeping, you're not eating. When you're not eating, you're fasting. And the longer you can stretch that out between when you finish your meal the night before and when you eat your first meal the next day, if you can stretch that out to 12 hours, that's a pretty reasonable window to be able to get metabolic health. All right. I hope you guys learned something about practical tips for fasting and fasting windows. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you on the next video. Hey, if you like that video, then you're going to love this one. Check it out.